Welcome into this crossover edition of Locked On Seminoles with Locked On Ole Miss. I am Brian Smith. That is Stephen Willis. We're here to talk some transfer portal. Florida State is entertaining a certain Micah Pettus as a possibility, former Ole Miss Rebel. Stephen, we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about a few other portal guys, some Lane Kiffin information. You and I love talking about that when I go on your show, and also maybe a little college football playoff. So, Stephen, thank you very much for doing this crossover with me. I truly appreciate it. First question for you. Pettis is a massive guy, and I believe he's from Madison, Alabama. He's somewhere from the state of Alabama. Goes to Ole Miss. When did you hear, because, I mean, you've worked at Ole Miss and all that. When did you hear, okay, this guy's got a chance to be a player for us? How did that all kind of work out behind the scenes to the point where he was actually in the lineup for the Rebs?
I think it goes back to 2022. He emerged as the right tackle, and that was a weird year for Ole Miss. For anybody who knows, that was the Zach Evans and the first year of Quinshon Judkins, to where Ole Miss ran the ball like 75, 80% of the time. So Micah Pettus was a road grader out at right tackle. He was perfectly suited for the run game. He is what you expect. And honestly, Micah Pettis in a real world, if we're really doing it, not in the NIL world where you have to pay to keep people and all that. And he obviously wants to be a tackle, but his future is at guard. This guy is an absolute road grader in the run game, and he has a little bit of a problem being grabby in the pass game. So in pass pro, that can be a problem, especially when you're dealing with an end that has a certain amount of quickness of what's going on. He's a character. Florida State fans, if he ends up there, will enjoy him on campus of what everything that's going on. He's a fun player on the offensive line to watch. But I probably first heard about him in 2022, whenever that Zach Evans, Quinshon Judkins year happened.
Okay, well, that year was a breakout, and Judkins came out and just kicked the crap out of college football in general. He's a really good football player, obviously doing well now at Ohio State, but you don't get to run through holes unless guys are opening them. Mm-hmm. And I think the Rebels have done a good job of evaluating a lot of three-star guys, coaching them up. And it sounds like Pettis is kind of in that realm. Like he was still raw. He's 350. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's like 6'6", 350. He's just humongous. When did you think, okay, this guy's not just a starter for us, but like, this guy's a dude? Was there a game or anything that broke out, or is it just like the entire season in 2023, it became known that's when his first year they really played a lot, and it just happened first game? When did it take place?
The relationship between Micah Pettis and the Ole Miss fan base is interesting because, like I said, you enjoy watching him. He's fun to go, but there's a lot of stuff to where drives have been killed in 2023 and 2024. So his pinnacle was probably early in the 2023 season.
Okay.
That area was the point where Micah Pettis, maybe it was against Texas A&M when the A&M player like hit him in the nuts. You know, whenever got mad. Yeah, just punched him just straight up, got a 15-yard flag. I think that was probably the pinnacle of Micah Pettis. And then after that, a lot of, like I said, holding calls started happening. It wasn't just him. It was on the whole offensive line. So maybe it was the way they were being coached at that time. And it carried over into 2024 a little bit. Almost had a little bit of trouble running the football this year. Maybe it was due to the fact that they didn't have that running back. I mean, against Florida, they were playing a fifth-string wide receiver at running back in that game. It was absolutely weird with the dudes that were supposed to be on campus. But I would say probably that Texas A&M game was the pinnacle of Micah Pettis.
Okay, I just looked it up. He had 7 penalties this year, according to Pro Football Focus. I mean, if you're 350, I don't expect you to be, quote unquote, the fastest guy, but I remember him running over some people. So you kind of defined him, and I just want to put up his overall blocking grades here in just a second. I'll share the screen with everybody so you can see it if you're on YouTube. If you're not, I'll define everything directly for those of you that are listening on audio. Stephen, would you say that Pettis was one of the top 3 linemen for the Rebs this past season, or was he just like the 4th or 5th starter? How would you define that?
Yeah, I think it was just the offensive line this year, for whatever reason, was just a bunch of dudes. If you want to say that, it's just kind of a bunch of dudes. They struggled to run block for whatever reason this year. Pass block was, could be. I think Ole Miss was too big, honestly.
They were massive.
I think Ole Miss got too big on the offensive line this year. That's just my opinion on that. And so a lot of this stuff could be that. Now, Micah Pettus this year, he was likely told to transfer after this season. Not because necessarily he did anything wrong. It's just Micah Pettis was not going to be playing right tackle and guarding the blind side of Austin Simmons potentially next year.
Oh, yeah. I forgot Austin's the likely quarterback. That's something I was going to ask you about anyway.
Yeah.
I forgot about that because Austin's a lefty. Right.
Yeah, and that changes the calculus a little bit when you're looking at offensive line. Jackson Dart would have no problem with a Micah Pettis because that's right in the eye line of what's going on. So you had to have a strong left tackle. And Ole Miss might have a guy this season that can move over from left tackle to right tackle. Maybe Jaden Williams is that guy. Maybe it's Diego Pounds. Maybe somebody can handle that. But that kind of contributed a little bit, in my opinion, to what's going on with Micah.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because Kiffin sometimes, and even myself, will say, well, he throws it too much. Well, when they're at their best, it's darn near 50-50. And he uses the QB as a part of that. But here are the grades for the 2024 season for Micah Pettis at Ole Miss. Overall offensive grade from PFF is 72.8. Run blocking is 74 on the dot. Pass protection, 66.4. As I noted, and Stephen had originally brought up, 7 penalties this year. SEC speed rushers, as Stephen will tell you, are not friendly. I don't know if this is correct. You tell me if this sounds right. They only credited Pettis with giving up 1 sack this year. I have a hard time believing it because that was against Middle Tennessee. That surprises me. I don't know if that's accurate or not. What say you, Stephen? Is that?
I don't know if that's entirely true. I do know this, that against LSU, he struggled.
LSU's got some quick guys on defense.
Yeah. Against South Carolina, he struggled. He didn't give up sacks, but he gave up pressures. And
100%.
as anybody that has followed, say, Princely Amon-Mielon, defensive end at Ole Miss, he would have 1 sack in a game, but have 12 pressures.
Right.
And those pressures are just important as the sacks because that just basically eliminates the pass game. A lot of times in these South Carolina, LSU, Georgia, those type games where the dudes on the other side, he struggled at playing an outside pass rusher. You move him into guard, right guard, left guard, something like that, to where he has some help on the outside to where he's dealing with 3 techs. I think he can absolutely kill that. But I think there's a little bit of an ego that comes into play because having that tackle word beside your name means that you're going to make more money. And I think it's going to be very hard to just talk people into playing guard. But I think his natural fit, I think it would be a heck of a guard. Absolutely, probably one of the better guards in all of the SEC.
Well, as you know, Stephen, a lot of guys think they're a tackle, and it doesn't mean you can't play it. Like Quentin Nelson plays guard for the Colts. He could play right tackle, but he's going to play in make himself a Hall of Famer by staying at guard. Sometimes you got to make the best long-term decision. I'm not saying Pettis is Quentin Nelson, by the way, but at the same time, it's the same principle. They're massive guys. Are they going to handle a 245-pound outside linebacker lined up in a 7 technique? That's not fun for them. So run blocking is probably something just straight ahead, man-on-man blocking. Not many guys going to handle him, is my guess. The quick 1 tech in the inside when he moves to guard at the NFL level, which I assume that's what he'll do like you, is the guy who has to worry about them. But right now it's that just pure edge rusher. Moving on, I'm curious about a couple of things portal-wise because, in my opinion, Ole Miss is not only doing a good job in the portal, they're doing a great job. And they're picking some needs here and there. They're involved with a lot of guys. And you and I were talking about Singleton, the guy out of Georgia Tech before the show came on. We don't know where that's going to end. Auburn, Ole Miss, somewhere else. He's really good. Is there anything else that you're seeing trend-wise? Is it position? Because like Ole Miss, they put their efforts in the portal as much, if not more, than anybody else that's a top 15 program. What trends are you seeing out there?
Younger players. They're going after multiple years of eligibility players, like Caleb Odom, going to Ole Miss. And with Austin Simmons coming in as a first-year quarterback, it would be nice. You're building that roster for the run. So maybe I'm not saying, because Lane Kiffin's a guy that wants to win the national championship each and every single year that he walks on the football field. That's just the way he's wired. But this roster is being built in a way to where 2026 is what 2024 was.
Yeah. Next year, if they go 8-4 or better with the first-year quarterback, and that schedule won't be friendly again, I'm sure. They're just flipping the schedule in the SEC, right? Yeah. It's got to go to Georgia. You know, I mean, they got some tough games coming up, but he'll still have plenty of arsenal. But he ain't going to have that same D-line. Like, that D-line was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that. Two, the other really interesting question I have, we both know Austin Simmons can play. We've seen him play. I know the kid. Is there any competition there? Like, what's the backup situation? Would Wayne take a backup quarterback? Because I was talking to somebody about this the other day at Florida State. Castellanos runs a lot. Florida State needs to do finding a backup quarterback in the portal. It sounds easy, but I don't think it is because nobody wants to sit the bench. What have you heard with Ole Miss?
They were in the game and got a visit from Anthony Calandria from Virginia. He ended up going to UNLV. They've gotten a visit from Mikey Keene, the quarterback out of Fresno State.
He'd be a good fit. He can spin it.
And Bo Prillo.
Pribula, the kid from Penn State.
Yes.
He would be a tremendous fit for Ole Miss.
Yeah, all three of those have visited, and I think it would be interested that the kid from Penn State, immediately after the Ole Miss visit, he just shut down the recruiting at that point and said no more visits. So it's kind of within the 4 teams that he's visited already. And Mikey Keene, I've heard really good things about his visit as well. Those are kind of the dudes. The way that Ole Miss is recruiting, they want people that they seemingly can trust if something happens to Austin. But this feels like Austin's team going in. This isn't a Spencer Sanders situation. This kind of feels like Austin's team.
That's interesting because Pribula, for instance, allegedly is leaving because Drew Aller is going to go back to Penn State for one more year. I'm just stating.
It's like Iowa or Missouri or something. Those are the other schools that were in this, and yeah, I can see him walking in and starting there more than him ending up in Oxford. I think Mikey Keene is much more likely than Pribula.
I would think so. Keene would be a great backup, and he'd be a great mentor. I've been around him because I covered UCF. He's a good dude, and he's pretty accurate. When it comes to the D-line and O-line market, you and I like talking about the trenches a lot anyway. There aren't a lot of guys that can play tackle in the SEC just in general. And there are even fewer that are capable of playing on the edge at top 15 level, whatever league you want to say. What do you think the going rate's going to be for a team, whether it's Ole Miss, Bama, Florida State, for a starting left tackle that's bona fide? And let me be clear to everybody before Stephen answers this. A lot of these numbers that I'm talking about will be discussed, whether it's legal or not, and it's not, with guys that are not in the portal yet, some of which are in the playoff. Because Stephen just brought up an excellent point. Ole Miss is not the only team that is looking at guys that have, quote unquote, more eligibility. And some of those guys are like next up and pick the school at Ohio State, at Penn State, at Notre Dame, at whatever school, and they're sitting the bench somewhere. If you don't think everybody's not contacting somebody else's player, you're sadly mistaken, by the way. Even if they don't do it directly, they're doing it through their agent or somebody else. It's just the way it is. So what do you think a guy that maybe your starter in 2025 would be, who's played a little bit but was a 4 or 5 star tackle at a Texas or Notre Dame or Georgia or something? What do you think Ole Miss would go, or some of these other teams that have big NIL budgets?
I do not know what Ole Miss would do because they do kind of like to moneyball this a little bit. Just because they are not Texas or A&M. So they have to, as I had Walker Jones from the Grove Collective on my show, and he talked about how Ole Miss has to make $1 spend like 3. So that's how they attack the portal.
Okay.
But like a place like Texas, or let's say or a place like Auburn or LSU, because those are 2 desperate programs, because that's not anything wrong. That's just, hey, you need to win, because if you goes 6-6, if Brian Kelly goes 6-6, they're having a coaching search. So that's what we're dealing with there. Those places, probably 1.8, 1.9 million for a
I can
left
see it.
tackle if you have a right-handed quarterback, a right tackle if you have a left-handed quarterback.
I can see it for one. Like if you're that one player away from making a deep run, it sounds crazy to people. To me, that's an easy decision. If you think it's a good young man, he's not going to cause you any problems. Somebody getting a cell phone on him, doing something he shouldn't be doing, all that kind of stuff. Because 1 year guy, it's a dude. I could see it happening. And it doesn't have to be a Texas player. It could be a guy, and I'm just randomly throwing. It might be a guy that's at the G5 level that was a late bloomer that blew up this year. That happens all the time with a guy that's at Rice. Ohio State desperately wants Rice. He's 6'7", 345, though.
There was a guy that was at like Sacramento State that blew up. Yeah. And everybody's fighting on that. It's like you're going from having no NIL to having all the NIL. I mean, that's what that's looking like for him.
Yeah. And I'm not picking on Sacramento State. They got no shot there. They're done immediately. As soon as that guy made a few rounds on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and X, it was over for Sac State. Okay. Now I want to ask you the fun stuff. Lane Kiffin. Do you like what he's doing with Ole Miss in general? And then, of course, I want your comments about his take on the playoff and all that. Just however you want to answer that, fire away at those two questions.
I'm extremely thrilled with Lane Kiffin. I mean, Ole Miss is a win against Duke in the Gator Bowl from having 3 10-win seasons in 4 years.
That's pretty good for Ole Miss standards, to say the least.
Yeah. So every Ole Miss fan is thrilled with Lane Kiffin. And I have no problem with what he's doing in the playoff. And we talked off the air before it started. It's kind of like when he was at FAU and he did the season ticket thing to where the shirt didn't quite fit and he was very monotone and all that. And they ended up playing that on SportsCenter, and that was the goal, to get attention the only way that they could, because they were at Florida Atlantic at that point. Lane Kiffin, through what he did, no matter how you think about what he said, do I think he meant it? No, I don't. But him saying it got a ton of engagement over the course of the college football playoff weekend, to where Ole Miss was being talked about by everybody while they weren't playing in college football playoff games. That was the intent of all of this, and I think he succeeded in the intent. Now, is he the villain right now in college football? I did a show on Monday to where it's like, yes, Lane Kiffin has become the villain of college football to everybody outside the SEC. Ole Miss needs to embrace being the villain and the face of the SEC. Now, if Georgia wins and all that, winning's a different thing, but just the face. People are going to associate Lane Kiffin with the SEC because they view him as whining over the playoff. Does Ole Miss deserve to be in the playoffs? No, they lost to Kentucky at home. They do not deserve it, but their ranking makes it close enough to where he could play that game of making the tweets on there. And all of a sudden it makes sense, because if Indiana's getting blown out, if SMU's getting blown out, if Tennessee's getting blown out, Ole Miss has as much right to say, hey, you put us in those games, we would do better than that. Now, would they? I don't know. Who knows? But the fact that the blowouts happen means he could talk. The way he talks is going to get the attention of the outsiders, and Joel Klatt and all of these are talking about what Lane Kiffin said today, and that was exactly the point.
I think he is a lot smarter than people give Kiffin credit for. He's a goofy guy. I don't think he would deny that, but he is also somebody that's very cunning. He knows how to get under people's skin. I forget what exactly he said, but when he was on air with one Mr. Paul Feinbaum not too long ago, and he was like, what is exactly that you do? Like, just live to his face. It's hilarious. Yeah. I was like, oh my God.
He really is the modern day Steve Spurrier.
Yeah, he's the closest thing. Steve was the best I ever saw at it.
Yeah.
But Kiffin ain't far. He's good at that stuff. And I think that's hilarious. It is what it is. Any advice that you would say to Florida State fans about like building through the portal? I've given my own takes on it. And Florida State, until this year, in my opinion, was the best at evaluating it. Obviously, they failed miserably in 24, and I'm being kind. What thoughts do you have about the portal and building through it?
The position that you can't portal, that you want to be able to portal, that you need to be able to portal is a quarterback. The teams that do the yo-yo up and down are teams that go and try and find 1-year rentals in the transfer portal playing the quarterback position. Florida State found that out this year. And whenever that happens, if you have one missed evaluation, it can throw everything askew.
It's high risk.
It's one of those things to where Ole Miss, the way that Lane Kiffin does it, he went and got Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart had 3 years of eligibility. So he got to basically
deal holistically.
Yeah. So you got to grow into the system. And while that happened, they recruited an Austin Simmons. Austin Simmons is getting ready to be in his 3rd year in the system. So what Lane Kiffin's done is he gets all the pub of being a transfer portal king and all of that. But the reality is the really important positions are positions that have multiple years of eligibility, and they make the system culture shift pretty consistently happen. And as long as you can avoid those super leaders, because everything in college football is quarterback driven, as long as you can find somebody in your system to play the quarterback position, you're going to be all right. If you're Florida State, you had Jordan Travis, you would have been fine. I mean, it's amazing how different that program looked with Travis as Uyunglele.
Yeah, like Florida State's got Thomas Castellanos coming in, but he played at UCF under Gus his freshman year. So that's a little different.
He was built in a lab for the Gus Malzahn offense.
Oh, 100%. Because he could play tailback at Florida State or Ole Miss. Like, he's that athletic.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there's a Cam Ward or whatever in every portal cycle. But I'm pretty leery on it too. Notre Dame's gotten away with it a little bit and some other teams. But most teams do better to kind of go through the traditional, like Alabama, obviously Georgia. LSU, Daniels was a 2-year. Some people forget Jaden was pretty good as a senior, but as a 5th-year senior, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
2nd-year guys are going to do better. It's just more time and reps there. I agree. And I told some of the Florida State people on the site earlier today, before we did this podcast, talk about, we got to get to the point where you're seeing Florida State get top classes again out of high school in certain spots, O-line in particular, quarterback. So the portal is the accent. It is not the end all be. And to be honest, with Ole Miss, I think they've been overcharged with that, because like Quinshon Judkins is a kid they stole out of Montgomery, right from underneath Auburn's nose.
We talked about Suntarine Perkins all year.
Oh my God. Well, you and I talked about him before he got to Ole Miss. We both like this NFL player.
Yeah.
Period. Like, he's ready for the NFL now. Unfortunately for Perkins, he can't even leave. He's only a sophomore. I'm sure that whoever does these freaks list, him and Jeremiah Love are 2 sophomores. They're getting cheated because both of them are ready for the National Football League. It's just, they're the exception of the exception, but that's a whole nother tangent.
So, the next thing that college athletes are going to do after they get finished suing the NCAA on every single issue is going to be suing when they can be a professional football player.
That'll come back up. That's an antitrust thing. There's been guys try it. It may pass. And I don't know how you get that done, because there are a lot of kids that would probably think they're ready. In the NFL, it's not as much about the physical, it's the off the field. So they want older guys because of cell phones and everything. They're worried about what they do off the field more than on the field. And they're not going to say that, but I know that's to be the case.
Yeah, but players like Deion Smith should be playing in the USFL right now, not trying to get eligible for college football.
Yeah, he's too athletic to be sitting around. It is what it is.
Yeah.
All right, for Stephen Willis, this is Brian Smith. Thank you for watching this Locked On crossover, Locked On Seminoles, Locked On Ole Miss. Everybody have a good one. I will talk to you again very, very soon.